Hey ABA Inside Track listeners, it's Rob with a quick announcement. This Thursday and Friday, October 13th and 14th, me, Jackie, and Diana will all be at the Babbitt Conference in UMass Amherst in Western Massachusetts. It's beautiful this time of year, and we really hope that many of you will be in attendance. If so, why not stop by and say hello if you see us wandering in the hallways or sitting in on a lecture? For a special treat for those of you at the conference, if you come up and say hi to us, we will have a very special, super secret code word and instructions on how you can win a free credit towards the purchase of a continuing education certificate. Wow, very exciting. Don't worry, those of you at home. We'll also have some details on the website and on the Facebook page of how you can participate, even if you're not able to make it out to Massachusetts. We hope to see you there at Babbitt this Thursday and Friday. And now, our new episode. Welcome to ABA Inside Track, the podcast that's like reading in your car, but safer. I'm your host, Robert Perry Cruz, and with me are my fabulous co-hosts.
It's Diana.
And it's Jackie.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hi, Rob.
This is episode 17, where we'll be talking about ethics in data collection, and we have a very special guest who has sat through sound check and all of our shenanigans to get to the meat of our discussion. It's Dr. Amanda Karsten. Hi, Amanda.
Hi, everybody.
So good
Welcome.
to have you here.
Hi.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here, despite the shenanigans.
Despite those shenanigans. Amanda, we asked you to come, or one of us, Jackie, you emailed, so we thought that you could be on because we knew you had a lot to say about the topic of data and how we as behavior analysts collect data and how we sometimes don't do the best job that we possibly can on doing so.
Yeah, I think data are a central piece of our best practices. They play a central role in best practices for behavior analysts, but we don't all have equal opportunities to learn how to collect good data and to use those data in decision making. So one of my personal interests and missions, I guess, as a teacher is to try and package and share some strategies to help more behavior analysts get more data into their decisions.
Very good.
I love that. And for everyone out there, this is an ethics CE! Ding, 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 ding! You've won! It's awesome.
I would very much like to buy new stands for our microphones, folks. So if you don't
Oh
really
my
want
goodness
ethics,
gracious.
you know, we are selling them a pretty low price. I'm just saying.
It's an
Only
ethics, Rob. Ethics.
$6.
You may have missed the point.
I mean, we're providing a service, you know, that's capitalism. That's ethical, right? So we won't be going into immense depth in the articles like we usually do because they're sort of more background information, something we're sort of starting our discussion with. Though we do have two articles, and we hope that you read them because I think it will make some of our other points make a lot of sense, or actually most of Amanda's points make a lot of sense. We'll just sort of comment on that. So those articles are Practical Implications of Data Reliability and Treatment Integrity Monitoring by Vollmer, Sloman, and St. Peter from Behavior Analysis and Practice, 2008. A Proposed Model for Selecting Measurement Procedures for the Assessment and Treatment of Problem Behavior by LeBlanc, Raetz, Sellers, and Carr from Behavior Analysis and Practice, 2016. And Effects of Data Sampling on Graphical Depictions of Learning by Carey and Beret from the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis, 2014. So again, we won't be going into a ton of depth on those articles.
These are really more background articles to
Yes.
infuse the discussion
Yeah. Infusing.
with data
That's it.
and words. Mostly words with these. They're less data. Isn't that funny? They're less data-driven papers because they're thought pieces on data. Whoa.
Mind blown.
So when we were kind of getting ready to start recording the episode, we were talking about some of those, the kind of the key components of how we do data and what data is. So, and Amanda, you were kind of giving us sort of a general summary of sort of the things that you usually start off if you're doing a lecture or you're teaching a class when talking about data.
Yeah, I mean, I think a first important point to be clear about is what data are to behavior analysts, and our 7 dimensions that kind of define the scope of what we do in ABA. It's empirical, it's often analytic, and it's highly individualized. And how do we come to provide individualized recommendations? Well, those recommendations need to be occasioned by something unique about the client you're serving right now, the person in front of you who you're tasked to help. And so data are one of the main bridges between the general wealth of strategies that we have in our literature and what you should be doing and recommending right now for this particular case. We also have ethical guidelines that lay out different ways we as behavior analysts use data, and those are found in the Compliance Code, new in 2016. And I can mention just a couple of them. We use data to communicate with both our clients and other professionals. So behavior analysts may be working on a team, maybe even people from other disciplines, and data should play a central role in how you convey what you've learned about the needs of the client and the environment they're in currently, and what kinds of steps will be most productive moving forward. We use data to evaluate, of course, the effectiveness of the programming that we design, and that includes providing supervision and training services. So the Compliance Code is pretty clear that if you're out there supervising aspiring behavior analysts, that data should play a role in how you make decisions about when that person's training with respect to a particular task list item is complete. They've demonstrated competence in an objective way. And there are other applications too, but data really, again, are central to many of our activities as behavior analysts. So it's a topic I care a lot about, and one of the main reasons that I started spending time on this and reading some of the great articles that we'll talk about tonight is I realized in my own practice history that the choice is not between database decision-making or decision-making in a vacuum. I've had some mentors like Ed Daly along the way kind of encourage me in this line of thinking and get me to see that for a lot of new behavior analysts, especially who just haven't experienced like years of contingency shaping, having certain things work and certain other things not work, that when they enter a new situation as a practitioner without data to sort of anchor them to who this client is and how much of the behavior is occurring, the conditions under which it's occurring, it's really easy to let other things drive decision making. So I'm sure you guys have other things that you can imagine might influence how you make decisions if you're not faced with data. We could start with the ideals, like the things you would hope influence your decision making.
Oh, yes. That would be nice.
Like maybe the research literature, evidence-based practices.
Those are good.
I do everything I do because of published peer-reviewed articles.
Right.
Ideally.
I would love it if all of my supervising BCBAs have said that to me. Oh, where did you find
making
that?
It up, Jackie.
I know, but wouldn't that be amazing though? I'm like, oh, this is a great treatment. Where did you find it? Oh, didn't you read
Java.
blah, 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 2015? And I'd be like, oh, great. Unfortunately, that's not usually the case.
Well, and ideally, we'd all have, a wonderful training history in a graduate program where they spent a lot of time, again, teaching us about evidence-based practices and best practices in data collection and database decision-making. So that history would play a big role in how we treated a particular client coming to us for services. We like to think about resource constraints and client preferences. So, again, individualizing based on what we know the needs and limits of the current case are. But in reality, there's probably a lot of other things. So some of the non-ideals, like anybody here have kids who sometimes get sick and cramp your style in terms of your work schedule, or other kinds of competing responsibilities.
Right. My favorite is the favorite treatment plan.
Oh, yeah.
That one is my favorite. I use this for everyone because it works.
Is that a
Sometimes.
direct quote, Jackie?
Yes, it is.
I'll see that
But
sometimes.
not from you.
Not for me, no.
Some other person. I'll see that sometimes with folks who've been in the field a very long time, either as behavior analysts or as educators, that, this is the way I was trained, or this is what I learned to do, therefore this is what I do.
Differential reinforcement of other behavior.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right?
So I get that a
The
lot.
DRO town.
I don't need to see the data. I'm sure it worked.
Right.
I love that. That reminds me when people say that, I want to be like, hey, have you bought a body wrap lately? Because those work in quotations, those
What is
body
that?
wraps. So the body wraps are like when you're trying to lose weight or
Those
try
like
to
those
look
detox,
yeah,
like
you're trying to
saran
look
wrap?
slimmer,
Yeah.
and they're actually called It Works. And so it's a wrap, and you like put it around your body and just wear it for like 5 minutes, and then you take it off, and supposedly you're like inches skinnier. And you don't need data, scientific evidence, because you can just see it. It's
You can
like,
feel it.
oh yeah. And so
there's a relevant piece of that, somewhat tangential.
it is.
And that is that the data-based, I would argue, ABA way, because data are, again, a characteristic of ABA practice, or should be. That's an effortful path, just like exercise
Absolutely.
and diet. So in some ways, these other factors we're complaining about a little bit or cutting down, I mean, they have their appeal because they're so much more natural than collecting a bunch of data and ensuring the quality of those data and then using those data to make decisions. When I could just walk into a classroom and trust my gut. Like, I've seen a kid like this before, or he's just like the kid I finished work with, 2 weeks ago. I know what to do next. It's a much less effortful response, something like a body wrap.
Yeah.
Right. And basing decisions on data can be off-putting to families, I feel. It's easier to present to them, well, this is what I know, and this is what's worked in the past, and this is what feels right to me.
They
this
love
is what
that.
seems right for your child. Like that, those types of phrases get you farther than saying, well, I'm basing my decisions on data, and I've broken everything down into these numbers, and here they are. These represent your child.
Yeah, there's something kind of cold and calculating and experimental or controlling about referring to data in our decisions. And that term doesn't have the same meaning for a lot of audiences that it does for behavior analysts, especially if you've come up through a sort of research-intensive graduate training experience. You love data. You seek data. And that's not how the world feels about the same term. So one of the things I hope we'll get to talk about at the end, when we get to ways for everybody, sort of regardless of where your starting point is, to improve the quality of data in your decisions. One step of that is really choosing wisely how and when to make explicit reference to data versus when it's probably okay to use softer, cuddlier terms and just know for yourself that there are hard data behind them.
Right.
Yeah.
One thing I want to point out is if you are a new behavior analyst and trying to work out how to talk about data, remember data are plural. And so that's a big problem I think that we usually have is it'll be data is all over the place. So this is a good practice that it's plural, so it's data are. And
the datum
is right. And another thing, if you're a new behavior analyst, don't forget that you should be printing out the professional and ethical compliance code for behavior analysis found on the BACB website.
Ideally in color.
I have it in color. It's blue. And you should be keeping it with you. So I recommend...
Close to your heart.
I recommend all my students keep the compliance code in their book bag because you never know when you're going to need to look at it.
In their back pocket.
Yeah, I actually made them little back pocket compliance
that's
codes last year.
adorable,
Yeah,
Jackie.
they loved it. I got a little ethics
Can I get
patrol.
one?
Yeah, because you need this. So it's something that if you don't know, you don't sometimes have time to go to the website, look up the guidelines, and say, "Oh yeah, I can or cannot do this." It's always
There's
helpful.
some really good guidance in there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pocket compliance code. That's all I'm saying.
Can you make me one?
Yeah,
too?
I'll make you one too.
We
I'll
should-
make you one too, Amanda.
We'll sell that on our merch store with
Yeah.
our t-shirts and hats.
Right.
I love it.
It's my face on a hat.
Can I get one of those as well?
Yeah.
Is it a trucker hat?
Yeah,
Okay, good.
with mesh.
Great.
But yeah, back to
Yeah.
the podcast.
And the BACB will help you.
They will.
You guys know this too, right? If you have a problem,
There's a hotline.
call them up.
Anytime.
They will solve it. It's an incredible service.
It's like DJ Revolver. Remember that song?
Check out my hook.
Yeah.
DJ Revolves it. Yeah, I do.
But yeah, so I think even if you email them too, they can get back to you really quickly. And actually, John Bailey is the man that answers the phone, or it gets delivered to him, which is kind of amazing.
I saw him speak a
kinda
couple
like
years
Santa
back.
Claus.
Yeah.
He said he still will
He's still
answer
doing
the
it.
phone.
I might need to make up an ethical
I know, I was thinking
conundrum
about that.
just to talk to John Bailey on the phone.
OMG, John!
John, I want to start selling these wraps for people. What do you think?
Is this
Take
ethical?
data on them.
Yeah. So that's just my little side there.
Yeah.
That you too can have the compliance code in your back pocket.
I like that quite a lot, actually.
Yeah.
That's good. But even if folks are operating on some of these other contingencies that maybe aren't ideal data-driven decisions, they're still products of their past reinforcement history. So people who have arrived at, well, I've always done the same thing and that's what I'm going to continue to do, or, well, the parents don't like it when I talk about data. They didn't come there with no history. They've come there through sort of relatively honest means. But that's why we're here today, is to talk about the ethical dilemmas in not addressing data-based decision-making and making sure we stay on the right path.
Absolutely. I mean, the people who are master data, measurement system designers and data collectors and database decision makers got that way, in large part through often a lot of contingency shaping and working closely with mentors. And it's ambitious, to prepare behavior analysts for practice in a couple of years. So it makes sense that some of these more complex repertoires are not underdeveloped, but that there's still a lot to learn when people enter the field. So I think we shouldn't judge it. We should do our part to share what we know. And that starts with being clear about what makes for good data, what some features of good data are. Can we talk about that?
Yeah.
What are they? There's got to be a better way.
So there are different ways about defining or talking about good data, but the three features I like to keep in mind are good data are behavioral, they're believable, and they're visual. And so what do I mean by the behavioral piece? So this is where we get the most direct measure of that which we hope to change as possible. We prefer directly observing a problem behavior as opposed to talking to a teacher about whether that problem behavior occurred today. And that doesn't mean there isn't value in talking with stakeholders and the people we're serving. We can get tons of valuable information through interviewing and, kind of getting their impressions about the story of the behavior and what's going on and why it's happening. Tremendously valuable. But when it comes to assessing the need for behavior analytics services and then executing those services in an individualized and hopefully effective way, we need the most direct measure possible of the relevant behavior in the relevant context. So I kind of wrap all of that into good data or behavioral data. Component number 2, good data are believable. This is where we're talking about things like IOA. It's hard to know whether data collected by one person at one point in time are accurate or representative of what was actually happening. Distractions can come up. We mentioned competing responsibilities earlier. Maybe you've got, a spike in problem behavior for another student in the classroom, so you end up kind of slacking off on observation for a second student you're charged to observe, and it ends up looking like a deceleration or decrease in their problem behavior, even though it's a product of not having observed as consistently. And that could really influence some future decision making around the effects of a treatment or the need for continued services. So we need believable data. That means data that oftentimes for our purposes that we have some IOA on.
And the Vollmer article does a really nice job of giving examples of exactly how that could happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, they make a strong case for the importance of IOA, even outside the context of research. It's useful for practice as well. Really easy to follow descriptions of several strategies for calculating IOA, which is one of the reasons I love that article and many articles in BAP is just their practical value. They sort of demystify those calculations and make it pretty easy to figure out what you can manage in terms of the schedule of data collection and then how you can, go ahead and calculate. Are you getting reliable results?
This is a nice article for any of those behavior analysts out there that are working like maybe in a smaller setting, working primarily on billable hours. Maybe you don't have a huge indirect overhead costs because that is when IOA typically falls to the wayside because IOA obviously is not billable for most insurance companies. And so this is a really good article to find cheap, practical ways to get IOA done without having to hire an entire person just to do that.
And I think for folks who are doing more consultation in schools or at residences or for private companies, I know anytime I leave an area, no matter what my recommendations are, if I have any data piece, I know I have to set aside a time to do training or to train a trainer so that they can gather good data. And that's something that certainly when I started in my career, I was just like, oh, here's your ABC sheet or here's your event recording sheet. I'll see you in a week. And then I'd get these results. And then when I observed, I'm like, I don't think this is at all what happened. And I just wasted a week and I feel really, really bad. So nowadays I make an extra point. But I think it's something that's really easy to forget. If you've got a caseload of 30 kids and you're going in and checking 30 minutes here, 30 minutes there, when am I supposed to train this person? I can't do it. There's no time. But if you don't spend the time, you will not solve the problem, and it's probably better to spend the time to start so you can solve the problem quicker, if at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just have a mound of unreliable data.
Or no data at all.
Or no data
Someone
at
did
all.
hand me a big pile, like, these are all my notes. I hand wrote them from my own opinion. And I said, I'm going to be honest, I'm not going to look at any of those. Just use the sheet I gave you and the way I trained you to take the data.
So the last criterion is visual. It's important that our data can teach us something at a glance, that we don't have to, in fact, leaf through a pile of narrative.
I can visually see it's a huge pile of data you collected.
Right. So graphing data is an important practice. Authors like Alan Kasdan and certainly Johnson and Pennybacker have laid out super clear guidelines for, I think the White Book, Cooper, Heron, and Hewitt even includes some specifications. Guidelines for putting together an easy to inspect, visual display. It's important that these are current, they're updated regularly, and that you can quickly check the graph as opposed to leafing through the raw data to see what is happening with behavior.
Yeah.
Being able to see data makes them, it really facilitates the data exerting some control over your next step, your next response.
Yeah. I think that's how you know you're a behavior analyst, is when you click on Excel to pull up your graph and your heart goes pitter-patter because you can't wait to see what the data look like.
Absolutely.
Right?
It's useful.
So exciting.
It's useful. And I've openly admitted being a behavior analyst does not make me a better mom, but it has taught me a lot about what to do when I mess things up. And so sleep training both of my kids was pretty hellish. And in both cases, I had a lot of trouble with adherence and just struggling with some of the points at which we were letting them cry it out, not indefinitely, but for intervals that were longer than my comfort zone. Data really helped me to see literally, as opposed to the way I was feeling emotionally, to see that those crying spells were getting shorter, and within a couple of days, with higher adherence and integrity, both kids did great. But I had to learn it all over again, use the damn data, Amanda, with my second kid. So yeah, it's a little nerdy, but I'm okay with that. Data are so useful for bringing our responding as parents or as practitioners under the appropriate stimulus control, which is under the control of what's going on, what's changing in the behavior of our kids or our clients.
One thing I've heard as a common complaint for not using data would be, I don't know how to graph, so how could I possibly look at my data? I'm not lying. This is serious.
So I think you're lying.
But it's true.
Don't we all know how to use Excel and to go into the source data and change everything around?
It's sometimes hard, but
No.
I like to.
Go ahead, Jackie.
But I say, hey, have you ever read the article by Nick Vanslow, what's published in the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis? He was just here, but not a different one, on how to use Excel. And also Mark Dixon had one that was really nice a few years back.
Yeah. Barton and Ryko.
Oh yeah, so there's tons of them. So you're not alone, as Michael Jackson told us once.
I am here with you.
Yeah, so you can learn how to graph too.
And if you want to replicate one of those studies, just wait till they do another version of Excel.
Right, and then get in there
Pretty much
first.
the same thing.
But that's true. So then I'm like, oh, have you not read this? And I pull out the article and I hand it over.
Oh, I made a
I love,
movie
though-
about using Excel to make a graph.
Oh, I've watched it.
Oh, have you watched my movie?
Yeah.
Is it a feature film?
No,
It's a documentary.
I think it's like 18 minutes long.
Is it that long? I can really talk for a long time.
Yeah, it's
can't
pretty
I?
long.
Look at this graph. Look what I made here.
You know what I love, though, is going back and looking at really, really old articles before they had Excel. And you can see it's like hand-plotted data. There's just something so beautiful about that. You don't need anything fancy. You just need grid paper, and you can make your own
And a pencil.
graph. Yes.
Depending on the size of your organization and your capacity to ethically and securely store hard copy only data, it can still work today.
Absolutely.
There really is no excuse not to make your data visual.
I did the other day. I couldn't access a printer, and I was like, "Well, I got to show the teacher this data." So I had to try to remember what the graph looked like and look at the points. I'm like, "Okay, I think this. It generally looked like this."
You
That's
drew it?
funny.
I drew it.
Or did you just draw it in the air like you did just now?
No. I drew it on a piece of paper. It's still in my notes somewhere. It's very proud.
That'll be our next additional supplementary thing that we put out on the website.
What
Rob's
pictures of my
graph.
Rob
graphs?
draws data in the air.
It's the only way to do it.
So I think people are generally clear about the importance of collecting data, although I think there's more variability. Yeah. Okay, maybe not.
Depends on the field. I think in
All right,
our fields,
but do you think
you're
that on the
supposed to.
average, right, you know you're supposed to. So maybe you're not great about doing it, but don't you think on the average, most behavior analysts, if you were to ask, like, do you have data? The answer would be yes.
Behavior analysts, yes. I think there's a big push in every single field. You need to look at data. And I think that's just new enough that so many folks who are dealing with almost, the same clientele as behavior analysts are, don't understand that value. Or they get that they have to do something with data, so they write things down, or they circle boxes and they sort of just let it sit there, and then they give it to somebody and send it away and hope someone sends back something pretty that they can use.
I mean, in my experience, many disciplines do a great job of data-based decision-making. It's not necessarily the same data that we would collect, but I've certainly seen examples of physical therapists and occupational therapists and speech pathologists being real deliberate about their data collection procedures.
I would agree with you there.
But you're right in a sense that the use of data might not be as pervasive in some other disciplines as it is in behavior analysis. I mean, we want it at the assessment stage and the treatment stage and the service termination stage, and we want it all the way through. And you might see it for slightly different purposes in other disciplines. I think though those values are shared by a lot of different professionals. The point I was trying to get at is that even though behavior analysts know to say that data are important and to collect some data, in my experience, and I've been guilty of all of these things at various points, I will fully acknowledge, is that we miss the mark a lot of the time in terms of not just having the data, but having good data, the way we just defined them. So I can tell you guys about a few of the patterns I've both seen and been guilty of, and why they're problematic. Yeah. Some people are data squirrels. And these are, I will say, this squirreling practice is highly correlated with sort of boilerplate or stock operational definitions. So everybody with self-injury has essentially the same definition, and everybody with aggressive behavior has the same definition. So data squirrels collect data every day, all the time, on all of the behaviors.
Everything possible.
Everything possible. And what tends to happen is that data squirrels are not necessarily ensuring their data are believable. And because they're not assessing based on individualized definitions, their data may not even be very behavioral. They might not be capturing that dimension that matters, to achieve a socially meaningful change. And one example I've seen with this is measuring conversation with frequency count, so event recording of conversation. The dimension of conversation we're usually trying to improve might be something more akin to like in a response time. Do you keep the conversation going and volley it? Or the duration overall, how long can you sustain the conversation? So again, data squirrels, they know they need data, they're collecting data, but they're not necessarily the most valid or important data, and they may not be believable data.
And they may never do anything with those data because they have so much.
Exactly. And whatever you would do might not be as productive or effective because you're not working with good data.
Where would you say that you've seen that pattern turn up more often, or have you seen it turn up in certain areas, certain sections of our field?
Yeah, I mean, I would say my most I've seen this pattern in the schools. I don't want to beat up on the schools by any stretch, but ABA lab-type classrooms located in public school systems where you maybe have one behavior analyst kind of overseeing multiple classrooms, and it's driven into the non-behavioral teaching staff very early on. We need data on everything, but then those data aren't necessarily used or individualized in the way that we're defining what we measure or any of the things that make them functional.
And I always think, too, everyone who's collecting these data are human. And there is a limit to what you can really accurately collect. So you'll see people with 6 tally counters hanging on their belt and
jingle jangle down the hallway.
That's right.
What are the chances that they're getting the right tally on the right counter every single time? It really can impact the procedural integrity
of the measurement,
the measurement system that you have.
Alan Kasdan has a great review paper back in 1977 in Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis. I know. This is not new information. It's just something we need a refresher on now and again. But he cites studies that demonstrated that by increasing the number of free operant targets being monitored concurrently, you decrease the reliability of those data.
Yeah.
Same kind of thing when we're providing training for different observers at different points in time. So you train, let's say 3 observers initially on the same definition, and then through their subsequent experiences, they quote unquote drift, start measuring behavior a little bit differently, maybe because of actual changes in the environment or changes in the form of the behavior itself. But then new people are trained on the original definition, and we use those 2 sources to calculate IOA. And again, your IOA suffers, and it's a product of training people at different times or having definitions that maybe need to be updated based on the more recent form of the behavior. So it's a lot of work, a lot of effort, but don't be a data squirrel. So we also have data optimists. These are folks who are more careful about individualized definitions, and they're probably using graphs. They're making their data visual to inform decision-making, but they're too optimistic in the respect that, again, they're not doing those believability checks, not ever having 2 people observe the same events and sort of confirming that they've tapped into the same behavior with their measures. Even data optimists fall short, although they're using good behavioral definitions, valid definitions, and graphing their data and referring to their data often. I don't know that the data optimists track with a particular type of setting or context, but these are usually people with good behavioral analytic training. Again, they know a lot about good data. It's just hard to get it all done with the resource constraints. And they know they should be getting IOA, but they just haven't found a way to do it efficiently. And that's where Vollmer and colleagues might come in handy for some.
Yeah, totally. Because I always think the best of everyone at all times.
I do too. Like, you definitely know what you're doing.
I know, yeah.
You 100% know what you're doing.
I said what it
got
was,
this.
and I wrote it on a piece of paper.
And I trained you.
You're going to do it. Don't worry.
Yeah.
I'll never check this again. You're going to be fine.
It's true, though. And I actually cannot tell you how many times I've said, no, you've got this, when I should have been like, maybe you don't have this.
I mean, but Vollmer encourages us to start small. So he says 10 minutes per client per week.
Which is pretty
We can
doable.
all
That's
find
doable.
that,
Yeah.
right?
Doable.
We can all find that.
Unless you have like 90
relevant conditions.
clients, and then you might have to go down to 5.
You might have other ethical
Yeah.
problems that you're facing at that stage. So we can also talk about data heroes. These are people who pay attention to the behavioral standard and the believable standard and the visual standard, but they're at risk of turning into data snobs.
Uh-oh.
They've figured out data collection and database decision-making for themselves, but they exclude maybe new hires without a lot of background in behavior analysis, or even the parents of the people they're serving, their stakeholders. They exclude them from the value of the data and the importance of the data in the services they're providing. So I'm not encouraging listeners to avoid being a snob by making everybody learn our lingo around data and database decision-making, but I am suggesting that if you've mastered this craft, you should share some of what you know and use it to enhance, all of the aspects of the work that you do, including communicating with the people you're serving or colleagues in different disciplines. Don't keep it a secret. Include others and mentor others in developing similar values and skills. And don't be a snob.
When you're kind of talking about that hero to snob, I mean, we sort of had that gradient of kind of the, not the greatest use of data to better to best. Is it paradoxical that if you're a hero that turns into a snob, you actually are probably the least enjoy? Like, even though I know your data is good, but the way you're describing it and you're being so standoffish, I would rather listen to the person who just has a big stack of handwritten notes that's like, I think things are going pretty well. I got a big pile of papers here. I mean, would you say they're almost just as bad to some extent?
Yeah, I don't have any basis to make a direct comparison, but I definitely think...
What's your gut say? I know we're not usually...
My gut says that both are problematic and in slightly different ways. As behavior analysts, we all have a responsibility to help people understand what we do and see the value in what we do. We have to disseminate. And so certainly the data snob is going to fall short on that, and it may affect business if you come in a little bit too, I don't even know the kind words that I can use.
Hoity-toity.
Too hoity-toity about what it is that you're doing and, the likelihood that other people can understand. And, to be clear, not everybody wants to understand. Not every audience is game for that. But it's a skill set to strike that balance between hiding the good thing you figured out or keeping it for yourself and overwhelming people with details. So
I think that everyone really actually wants to know about data. It's how you bring it up. So if you're like super excited about a graph, everyone else is eventually going to get there. That is my motto. If I'm like, oh my gosh, look what's happening. Like, can you believe it? You can see this in your real life. Don't you see this in your real life? Look how great this is happening. Then people look at graphs and they appreciate them more. You just have to be real excited about it. Yeah. Like almost a little too enthusiastic. That's how I go over with my graphs.
Like interpret it back into real life.
Right. Yeah.
So people can see
what does
value.
that dot mean?
What does that dot mean? Look, do you remember that day when we were like, wow, I was doing awesome? There it is.
Right.
People look at them and they like them.
I think for everyone, it's sort of a personal thing. I think everyone has that story of, maybe it's different for us because this is the field we wanted to be in. We were trained to be here. But I think even folks who don't have that same background, there's always that moment you can tell either from just your enthusiasm about data or they hear a story about how Google used data to do something. How does Facebook use data? Whoa, that's how they changed the election. This information must be important because there is a lot more data that's just you are giving up data left and right. You just don't necessarily know to whom, and they don't want to share it with you because that's how their business model works. But there's data all around, and I think it's becoming one of those things that everyone's starting to feel like if they don't know about it, they're not going to learn as much as they could, or they're going to get taken advantage of in some cases. Not by us, but other fields that use data for ill rather than good.
What we should really do is make a song about data, like that. What is that Christmas song? Data is all around us.
I don't know that song.
You gotta let it show.
Jackie's behavior analysis song CD is also on our merch page. You can purchase that.
It's from the movie Love Actually.
Oh.
And there's
I might know what you're talking about. But...
It's from Love Actually, and like the guy's singing about Christmas, and he's like, Christmas is all around us. But we'll just change Christmas to data.
Simply having
not
wonderful
that one.
data time.
That one too.
There you go.
We could do this.
All the hits.
Wait till Christmas, guys. Wait till Christmas.
It'll probably just be a general holiday album.
Yeah.
Winter.
That's true.
Winter festival.
That's true.
We should take data on who is listening to the show and whether they want us to call it the Christmas or holiday album. It's the only way.
But anyway,
Right in.
I'm going to disseminate behavior analysis through my music.
Great. We'll just take data on how that works and let us know.
Pretty sure I'm going to have a...
Platinum record.
I think it's going to be low variability, low level, no trend.
Oh, man.
So we've got our types of data collectors.
Got our types of data.
We're hoping that we're all striving to be data heroes. We're using our data. It's
That's
believable data. Could we take a couple minutes and talk about that believable piece? Because I think that's the area. I know we talked it's just 10 minutes a week per client. We can probably do that, but maybe talk in a little bit more detail about how that relates and sort of going back to the Vollmer article, because I think that is I think that's one of the hardest things. I know for me, I think I'd probably vacillate between data optimist and data hero depending on how much stuff I have to do that week, how busy I am, how tired I am, who I'm working with, like that same, like, oh, this person's awesome. I'll be okay. I can shave off 10 minutes and go do something else, use the bathroom or eat lunch or something.
So data believability, I think it's an important dimension because as we talked about, if you don't know how accurate your data are, then it's really tough to make decisions or decide when you're done with services. We can end up changing a treatment that might have been effective prematurely. So that means extra work for you. You talked earlier about how it'd be interesting to do this kind of cost-benefit analysis of like, yeah, you do have to take time to assess IOA, but if that spares you designing a new behavior plan and training people on a new behavior plan when the one you had may have worked had you been more sensitive to what was actually going on, then it's avoiding that seems pretty worthwhile. I think, too, that Vollmer talks about this example of how we sometimes inadvertently reinforce inaccurate reports of data or inaccurate data collection. So we've all had those supervisees or maybe parents who you just know 10 minutes before they met with you, they were furiously filling out their data form, right? And so we have probably made the mistake of really praising when things look good and, I don't know, maybe providing a different kind of attention or response that was reinforcing when things don't look good. Like maybe we listen more when the data are not looking good. And so that ends up selecting a certain report that may or may not be linked to what's actually happening. So I think there are just a million ways to get a less good story, a less accurate story about what's going on with your client. And it's just best to go with direct report and direct experience. Behavior analysts should not be professional advice givers. And I think without believable data, that's kind of what you're left with. Like, here's what I know about the literature and how I will translate some of that, which may be relevant to your case. Yeah. But because I don't have believable data, I won't be able to say for sure whether it was relevant or helpful. You're a professional advice giver, and we have plenty of those. We need more behavior analysts.
Definitely.
Another problem that I've kind of come across when people are telling me that they can't collect data is because they don't necessarily know how to measure it. So what would you say to those people?
Yeah, we talked earlier about how not every graduate program or practicum placement may have opportunity to really shape these skills while you're still in schools. And even those that do, when you go into practice, you're operating at a much different scale for the most part than the caseload or the context you worked in as a graduate student. Fortunately, authors like Linda LeBlanc and her colleagues have put together some really user-friendly practitioner decision models to help orient people to certain aspects of treatment selection, and recently, in 2016, in Behavior Analysis and Practice, selecting an appropriate measurement system. And so they, just like the Vollmer paper, lay out in really accessible detail the considerations around selecting appropriate measurement systems and kind of walk you through step by step until you arrive at partial interval recording or permanent products, assessment of permanent products.
Yeah.
But not whole interval recording. They did not like
They
that.
did not include the whole interval recording.
I'm okay with that.
It's rare that
It
you need
is
to
rare.
use whole interval recording. But it's lovely. It's one of those flow charts where you answer yes or no and you keep going. It's like a quiz. It's like a Cosmo quiz, but for measurement of behavior.
What type of data are you?
Yeah. And then you get to the end and you'll see. I should use partial interval, duration, event recording, everything. I liked it a lot.
I did too.
Yeah, it's a handy resource. And so if you're already a data master listening out there, you should still make note of this article because it could be one of your ways of not being a snob. Again, maybe you have newly hired staff that you want to sort of facilitate them seeing the value and the effectiveness of behavior analysis a little more quickly. And one of the ways you can do that is by getting them actively engaged. And so having them work through this model and guess at what measurement you should use for a new case while still providing support around the appropriate measures. You don't necessarily let them do that independently, but you let them take a guess and, reinforce for making the right considerations. I think it's a great way to share the value of data.
And there's also a case example in the article itself. So if you don't currently have a student that needs a new method of data collection, you can always use the case example that they provide. They do it for you.
Absolutely.
It's a good teaching article.
It really is. Yeah.
It is a good teaching article. Yeah, if you're teaching courses out there, or, I don't think it's just for an audience of behavior analysts, minted behavior analysts. It could be other people with support. Maybe some parents would actually really appreciate this context for why we take time to generate operational definitions and choose the best measurement system, and sometimes have to tweak that until we get it just right before we can proceed with, we get our baseline before we can proceed with treatment. This might be useful context.
Yeah.
So before we continue on with more of the discussion, I just want to make sure that those of you listening for our ethics CE, it's our first ethics CE, isn't it? Ooh.
Big time.
We are going to give you the first secret code word that you will need. And that code word is banana. B-A-N-A-N-A. Banana, right?
You got it.
Thanks, Gwen Stefani.
They grow.
Banana.
They don't grow. Bananas do not grow from a high tree. They grow from the ground.
What?
They do. That's how bananas grow. They're not in a big tree. They come from the
shrub?
ground. Like a shrub.
Banana shrub?
It's a banana shrub. Yeah. Banana. You don't need to tell me it's a shrub.
That doesn't fit in with my schema. What I already know about bananas.
That's how they grow. Now you've learned something new. Add it.
I reject.
I'm also rejecting this. Only because I want to climb a banana tree someday.
You can climb a coconut tree, but I don't think you can climb a banana tree.
You don't know me.
Don't tell me what to do.
I think it sounds like a banana tree would be much easier to climb.
I
than a coconut
agree.
tree.
Oh, I guess because it's a shrub.
You just kind of like jump into it, and
That's
you're there.
my kind of tree climbing.
All right.
Banana.
Well, banana.
All right.
Do you guys know the Mo Willems book, We Are in a Book?
He writes the pigeon.
The pigeon ones.
He does the pigeon
but
ones.
No.
He's got one about banana.
Oh, should check that out.
Buying it.
It's pretty cute.
Have you read, what is it, Sam and Dave Dig a Hole?
Mm-mm.
Oh, you should
These
read
are all
Sam and
children
Dave.
books.
Sam and Dave Dig a Hole is a very, very good. I forget who wrote it, but it's got illustrations by John Klassen, who did This Is Not My Hat, and one of the ones won a Caldecott medal with like a fish steals a hat, or I stole this hat. But it's about these two kids, and they just keep digging holes, and it gets really bizarre. It's a good one though.
Cool.
No, you don't want to talk about children's books anymore, Jackie? What?
I'm over it.
Okay.
So,
All right.
we could talk about a few more strategies
I love strategies.
to
Me
get
too.
more data into our decisions.
I think that would be helpful.
So it's a good idea to start small, and your first step might actually be just assessing where your organization or your personal practice is with respect to good data and database decisions. So that might look like just finding out whether you ever have IOA on clients. And if not, maybe data believability is your goal, and you're going to pick a client to start building those practices and working out the kinks and making it feasible, while at the same time increasing the quality of your data and your decisions. It's a good idea, too, to consider ethical and legal considerations, because depending on which laws regulate the data in your organization, so HIPAA or FERPA, I'm definitely not advising that you go start diving into colleagues' files and finding out about the quality of their data. Just make sure you know the laws and data storage requirements, and that you're prepared to honor those as you improve your database decision making. Let's see, you're going to need partners. This isn't something you can go alone. So whether it's recognizing that your billable hours need to be met, even though this practice we're recommending takes a little bit more time, kind of negotiating that and maybe talking to mentors about how they get it all done, maybe soliciting the support of one of your supervisors or bosses if you're working in a school system, just to talk about a temporary reduction in caseload or sort of borrowing time from some other place in order to have time for this important task. You need partners, and it's going to be real tough to build in these new practices unless you have contingencies that support keeping them going. So I think it's just important to lay out those considerations first, because it's not easy. It's a good idea, too, backward designing your behavioral measures. And part of that is knowing what your goal is, which dimension of good data you want to try and beef up within your practices. Part of that is also a skill that I think not everybody gets equal opportunity to learn in grad school.
Absolutely, yeah.
And the piece of that I'd like to highlight is what I learned as case conceptualization, which is before.
Sounds fancy.
Well,
It does.
I was lucky to be trained in a program with a bunch of clinical psychologists, and this is a huge part of practice, but I think it's useful for behavior analysts.
Yeah.
They were behavior analysts too. So it involves basically as you're getting new information about a case, so you do your first observation, you talk to a couple of caregivers, you are playing with potential target behaviors and operational definitions, not committing to anything, but just sort of like road testing. And that's all part of case conceptualization, trying to understand prevailing contingencies and which behaviors and which dimensions of those behaviors will be most beneficial to target first. And it's a lot of talking to yourself or maybe talking to others on your team. But for me, a lot of talking to myself about what might be going on and picturing, road testing. Okay, if I measured this like this, would that be realistic in this context? Would that be something that the parents would relate to as an important goal based on what I've learned about their top priorities? So that's all part of the backward design. You don't sort of ready, shoot, aim. You want to...
Yeah, you have to think about the end goal and what is this going to look like day to day.
Absolutely.
As teachers or parents are trying to collect these data, and then what's the result going to be? Even if you collect perfect data, how is that going to inform your treatment? Because some data for some behaviors may not make that much of a difference in as far as what the best practice is to address that behavior.
And then the next step of backward design is just really using that LeBlanc model or other related considerations. So about what the resources are within the environment where measurement needs to occur, about the critical dimension of the behavior to narrow your way down to a data collection system that fits. And maybe popping over to the Vollmer paper would help you to, they actually present some nice models of data sheets that can incorporate IOA observations and even treatment integrity. So those models are really useful, and I think all a good part of the backward design. We have some kind of counterintuitive findings in the literature we may not have a lot of time to talk about, but if you're interested in this intuition as a not great way of deciding how to measure behavior, you should check out a paper that was mentioned at the top by Mary Kate Carey and Jason Beret. It's a paper in a line of research. There are other related articles looking at the types of decisions that we make by sampling a little bit of behavior or a more continuous record, especially in discrete trial instruction. And the thinking is, if you're only collecting data on a subset of trials, that should save you time, and that maybe you'll make similar decisions about when skills are mastered or whether skills are maintaining. And it turns out it doesn't look like it saves a lot of time to collect data on fewer trials, at least for experienced therapists. It doesn't save a lot of time, and you definitely make less effective decisions with less data.
Yeah.
So
Take home point for that one. Yeah. I was surprised, actually.
A little bit of a bummer.
Yeah. I think,
to be honest,
I agree.
Well, and it's not to say that there are never conditions where you would. I mean, that's the beauty of our science, right? It's always based on the individual and the individual environment and the individual client. So it's not to say there's never a case where first trial probes don't make sense. I mean, if you rely heavily on more incidental or naturalistic teaching methods, there might be some good reasons not to disrupt play, right? Like a nice flowing, mutually reinforcing interaction in order to turn and take data. There might be other reasons, but you can't justify it on, at least based on what we know so far, you can't justify it on, well, it's as good an indicator of mastery, because it doesn't seem that it is. And you can't justify it on, it's going to save a bunch of time or be easier for people, because it doesn't appear to. So food for thought.
And that is a big point, too. If it seems like it would save time. You'd think that it would be quicker to just take a sampling of data. But you're right. If you're a skilled clinician, it takes so little time to record that data. So then you at least have it.
Absolutely.
So really take-home point there is train your staff to be awesome data collectors. And you don't need to worry about this problem.
Well, you don't for like a couple weeks, and then they drift, so you got to kind of do it again.
Yeah, and I think just in that backward design process, avoid, as much dogma as possible around what's the best way, because the best way is whatever way is going to keep people safe and ensure that you make good, timely decisions. Not too soon, not too late, but like right in time. So when I mentioned safety, I think that relates to deciding how much data is enough data, because when we're dealing with either controversial treatments or treatments that are considered more restrictive or real serious problem behavior, you really have no time to waste with your decision making. You need to be right on top of what's going on with the behavior and make decisions accordingly. So looking at the context, I think, is more important than following intuition or ideas that might be floating around regarding the most efficient but effective ways of collecting data.
Yeah. Like you said at the start, pick the behaviors that are of the utmost importance to be taking data on, and then make sure you do a really great job of taking data.
Absolutely.
And I think I find the backward design and sort of, well, what is it you really need to know, and then what's the problem, where you're trying to get to, for those who either are new practitioners or are not practitioners, but they are required to use data. I found that to be a really great opening salvo, because you talk about, we're going to take data. Oh, I don't have time to take data. You take data on every... It seems, I think a lot of folks, especially if they know you or they have a relationship with you, assume as a behavior analyst, you take data on 1,000 things in a minute and you're great at that. Therefore, you expect them to take data on 1,000 things a minute. And again, the behavior analysts who are really good at taking data know how to limit the data, take useful data, use that data, and then change what data they're taking because the problem has changed. And getting that idea of like, no, you know what? You could take data on one thing only, and maybe that's all you need.
Absolutely. And context matters too, not to belabor the point, but so serious problem behavior or a controversial treatment might mean you need a bit more data to inform your decisions, more continuous recording. A second context that might matter is when you're using very complicated treatments or treatments that we know break down in terms of their efficacy when they're not implemented with integrity. And so if you're in a context where staff turnover is high or, again, the staffing ratios are not conducive to adherence and integrity, it might be important to get other resources. So I wouldn't necessarily put more burden on those people to collect additional data, but you might want to throw some more resources in there to really ensure that it's feasible to use the treatment you're considering if it is more complicated or more prone to break down in an environment with really limited resources.
Yeah.
I think the same applies when you're talking to parent training and like parent collected data.
Definitely.
Be like, you're only going to collect data on this most important behavior for right now. And then when you feel comfortable, we can move on to something else, but only when you're fine with what you're doing, I think is a good model. So I've seen parents like, I hate ABA. I'm an ABA hater.
That shirt is also available in our merch.
And because someone has come in and said, you need to take data at all hours of the day across multiple topographies.
Yeah.
I don't care if you're
yesterday
making dinner.
when you called me.
Oh, yeah.
And like everyone was running around and you were just trying to ask me a question on
One
the phone.
question.
And it took 5 minutes because I had to do that much redirection of everyone to leave me alone for
So
that
you
amount of
couldn't
time.
have-
What if you had asked me to take data? Instead of just answering a simple question on the phone.
Right.
I would have hated you.
So it makes sense.
It's fair.
Sometimes you can't, sometimes you have to limit it a little bit in order to expand.
Know your
later
audience and the environment that they're working in.
Right.
And it's part of that data tree of what are you?
Yeah.
Do you have the resources? I know you want to do this one, but do you have the resources to use these data collection methods?
That's important.
Which I appreciated because they certainly could have said, well, you should take this. And there's no reason you wouldn't. And the fact that they use resources, I think, makes it a much more useful tree for, all practitioners.
Yeah,
Definitely.
A second big strategy or series of strategies, if you want to focus on the believability of your data, is to just incrementally, baby steps, improve the believability through a few different strategies. So measure fewer behaviors. You already mentioned this, Rob, but that same review paper from 77, Alan Kasdan, that I mentioned earlier, points this out, that we really need to limit how many things we're requiring people to watch concurrently, especially free operant behaviors, things that could happen at any time. To measure, multiple responses that where the experimenter's more, or not the experimenter, the practitioner is more in control of like when that next discrete trial is presented. It's a little bit different story, but limiting the total number of behaviors and making sure that anyone who's collecting data has been trained on the operational definition. We really should be looking at competency-based training and at least an initial demonstration of IOA before somebody is turned loose to collect data independently. And I think that's true even for practice. It can be done efficiently. It really can save a lot of trouble later on.
Yeah, because your data are only as good as your operational definition.
Absolutely.
And if people aren't trained in it, then your data are not reliable.
And they probably need refreshers. And they need refreshers at the same point in time, not incidentally. Once a problem has come up, I sit you down and talk to you. But everybody's going to get a refresher this week because the definition changed a little or because it's been a month since we last touched base on it. Or because we have a treatment modification coming up or a phase change coming up. We want to make sure we have an accurate record of what's going on.
Everyone all the time when they're on shift and recording behavior data are needing to make little bitty decisions about whether this counts or that counts, or was that 6 inches, or was that forceful enough?
Exactly, yeah.
And it's easy to have that type of drift, particularly if you're not talking together.
Yeah, and then the other strategy in that category is just that, start small. So 10 minutes for one client in a relevant context each week is an improvement over no IOA. So go for it. And again, tweak your system, make it practical, and then start expanding to other relevant cases. Again, maybe starting with those sort of highest risk or cases where you're most concerned about making decisions at the right point in time.
And those data sheets that were included were helpful too. Because you're not just going to be taking IOA in a vacuum, you're doing it in the context of other observations that you might already be doing. So it's just something else that you can include to make that more rich.
And something else you don't have to do yourself, right? So they've given it for you. You don't have to make it
Yeah.
yourself, which sometimes I think people are scared of making data sheets. Because I know this is true.
I know.
This has happened because there's so much that has to be included.
'Cause then you fall into the quagmire of Microsoft Word formatting.
Right.
That's
that
why.
could happen for you. But I know that some people have literally been paralyzed with fear that they're going to forget something, or they're going to not make the box big enough, or not include the date or the time, and then realize 1 month later that they don't have the information that they need to get paperwork submitted to insurance. So it's a real problem.
So, I mean, one thing I think organizations can do in-house, but also I would hope to see more partnership between, university training programs and organizations, is share templates, and a template is not to be used in every case.
Right.
You might want to make it a PDF. But, as a model, like these are the critical features, maybe a checklist and a couple templates. These are the critical features that we, for billing purposes and for utility of the data, need to see on a data form. And here are some exemplars. Then, like, supported opportunities to generate a new data form.
Right.
Or to sort of problem solve. What do you do when you're observing but you don't have that data form ready to go? Like, what key pieces could you still take down that might be useful in this case? Yeah, I think people need to learn how to do those things.
Yeah.
It's not automatic or intuitive.
No. And I think that's helpful. So that's one thing that we've noticed too, is even direct care staff that have been working at a company under the direct supervision of a BCBA. They're great at running programs. They're awesome at graphing data. But when it comes to actually the implementation and designing of treatment plans and data sheets, that's where they haven't really had that opportunity. And so they've graduated from a program, they've passed the BCBA, and someone's like, all right, now make me a data sheet. And then that is when I get calls. Like, oh, I've never made a data sheet. Not from my program, obviously. But, that's where, we need to help out.
Yeah, and I think some of your other strategies, Amanda,
would get there too.
Get through that. Well, you don't need, at the end of the day, if you've got a sheet that has, 10 boxes in a row, and you've chosen event recording of punches to the face. That's all you got to look at. It's just a line of boxes, and you're going to check them whether it happened every 30 seconds across the next 30 minutes. All you got to do. It's all right.
Yeah, definitely. And so the last strategy is just to engage with your data regularly. So use your data and also engage others with your data. So this is where the dissemination piece comes into. This is something I learned from my advisor. I believe he learned it from his advisor. But data get the first say when you sit down at a meeting, certainly with other behavior analysts, and even more implicitly when you're sitting down with caregivers or colleagues in other disciplines. The data should also be behind the things you choose to talk about first or with greatest confidence, even if you're not showing the graph as you do that. But the data-based information leads, and it should also have the final say. Ultimately, when we make decisions, we like to be able to say whether it worked or whether we need to keep making decisions and modifications. So I think leading with data is a good practice, and it's a good value to instill in your students for them to carry on. It's made a huge difference, I think, in my effectiveness as a practitioner, that I had that value instilled early. We talked a little bit about teaching staff to interpret and apply data. I guess we haven't talked about that step yet. So as important as it might be to develop guidelines around good data sheets, part of teaching people the value of data is teaching them how to use data. And again, visual inspection is not an intuitive process. You can become real fluent with it, and it might feel like something you've just always done, but you learn to do it at some point. And some of us don't do it very well. I'll be honest about that. But there are some resources, available. I know that you guys had Nick Vanslow on. He's getting lots of props in this episode, but he did a nice study with Dr. Rachel Thompson looking at differences in visual inspection decisions between experts and more newly minted BCBAs, and there was a big difference because that's a contingency-shaped repertoire. But there are a number of papers by Wayne Fisher, Jim Carr, and Candace Josted. There are a number of published papers on methods to learn visual inspection. Again, something organizations might want to think about, sort of packaging and sharing. If you have those resources, think about sharing them.
Yeah, we're all in this together.
Absolutely. So those are a few strategies. I'm trying to think if there's any other baby steps I might want to I mean, if you need a real baby step, just when you go to work next time, look at some data.
That's the best one, I think.
You know?
Tomorrow is a day at work for most people.
Well, I think this is a good time as any to get into dissemination station. But Jackie, don't pull in quite yet. Don't pull in quite yet, because I want to give our listeners, if they're applying for CEs, our second secret code word, which is Lego. You can capitalize the L because technically you're supposed to, or you can lowercase. Doesn't really matter too much. Lego. The bricks or the candy that Jackie eats. Secretly, it's not candy. They're actually just Legos, and she keeps eating them anyway.
Crunchy.
I have a whole castle in my belly. All right.
All right,
so
now we can pull in.
I think we're pulling in to our final stop here at ABA Inside Track. I didn't even get it that we're on a track until right now.
Oh, wow.
17 episodes in. So here we come.
We're here.
Hey, everyone. Dissemination Station.
So, Amanda, like you were saying, a baby step, look at some data. That's a good start. But if our listeners say that, a lot of people listen on the way to work and they've been listening to this, you know what? Today's the day I'm going to get better at this data stuff. And they get out of the car, they walk into their office or they walk into the school. They have to do one thing so that they feel like they've completely done a 180 on their use of data. What do you think the very first thing they should do is?
For my money, I would pick a case where you're pretty confident your operational definition is solid. You've honed in on the dimension of behavior that needs to change. And I would pop in for IOA observation. That if you only did one thing, I'd pop in for IOA observation for 10 minutes on that first day.
Then they could have Lego candy too.
Why? Because they're getting that contingently for their...
Yeah.
Okay. They have to buy Lego candy, though.
Sure.
So stop. Don't go to work quite yet. You need to buy Lego candy first, then get there, then look at your operational definition, then go do IOA for 10 minutes.
Ooh, can I put one other qualifier in there?
Absolutely.
Of course.
If
a different candy? Is that...
No, not a different candy. So when you do that observation, if you read the Vollmer paper, you're going to see they talk about one of the practical uses of IOA is for providing feedback. Don't do that right away. If you're upping your game, it's a great recommendation. Yes. But if you're upping your game and you're newer to this, I think it's important to descriptive praise only the people taking time to collect data for you. And if you're going to start monitoring what they're doing, before you provide feedback about the accuracy of their data, you need to take a very careful look at whether your operational definition is solid, whether you've trained them adequately.
Yeah.
Cover all of your bases before you start using IOA for feedback purposes, especially, we're all still learning. So I just think that's an important qualifier.
I like that. So don't say, you know what? I just decided I should do IOA for the first time all year.
And by the way, you said.
Yeah.
Right?
I think people appreciate it when you tell them that you're just collecting data and not observing them. So when you do observe them, maybe tell them, like, I'm going to observe you and the procedures now because I feel like everything else is sound. Then they're at least aware.
Yeah, you could even rationalize it as, it's been a while and I just need to see if this operational definition is still capturing what it used to capture. And so I'm going to be here scoring with you today.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any need to try to save face. If you haven't done IOA in a while and you realize, oh God, no one's taking data on the right thing, you look at your definition, it's a bad definition. If there's any reason you wouldn't say, hey everyone, let's get together. We got to this is a great time for training because I just realized this behavior changed and we need a new definition. I want to make sure you're comfortable.
Totally.
Then you'll be a part of the team.
How many IOAs should you take in which you're not getting agreement with your staff before you tell them that they suck, though, Amanda? Like 2, 3? What's
you should never tell them that they suck.
Wait, what? Oh. I've been doing this wrong for a while.
I think it's probably different in every case, but I would double check and double cover all of my responsibilities before holding people accountable in that way. Yes.
There are so many factors.
Right.
So many factors
involved.
Take care of the ones that you can. I think that's just a good, with any staff training, take care of the ones that you can do. What can you do to make sure that it's that you're solving everything?
If your staff are not performing to the level that you would like, that's a training issue
It's
as
your
well.
fault.
So it still comes back on you.
So I can tell myself I suck, but I can't tell other people. That's my take-home point, I guess.
Rob, you're great.
You're
all are.
trying
Don't
really
say that,
hard. I know you want to get better.
That was actually really sweet. If anyone's listened to this podcast, that's a really nice compliment.
Thanks,
From
Jackie.
wife to husband?
Yeah.
We cut out the ones where we scream at each other.
Yeah.
Like, I hate sound checks. Why'd you buy this mixer? It's stupid.
Well, I don't know if this will make the cut, but I've just got to say, I think you guys are doing a great job. This is a great service. I am a podcast enthusiast and actually just a radio show enthusiast.
Excellent.
Like from way back, I used to have cassette tapes of
Yes.
old-time radio shows.
Oh, wow.
So you sort of made a dream come true by inviting me here. And yes, I might save this forever.
Oh,
should.
good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda.
This is a pretty
Thanks
serious
for coming
studio.
on.
Mm-hmm.
It's a pretty serious studio if
We
you
changed
watch.
the tablecloth just for you, for our guest appearance.
Yeah.
Why, thank you.
Yeah, clean.
It's lovely.
Clean
clean.
earth and
Cleaner.
Except Finn's spot.
Yeah.
yeah,
I
exactly.
feel like I've learned a lot, though. I think this has been a good hour of learning about data, learning about ethics.
It's a great review because I know, Amanda, I saw you talk at Endicott, and I was kind of looking at my notes and looking at some of the citations and trying to put something together for some of the staff that I consult to, and even just kind of going back and like, let me check Cooper. What do they say? I forgot so much of this because I assumed I was doing it right because I've done it this way for so many years, and
Right.
you don't necessarily, if you don't take great data, fail all the time and realize you need to change.
No, you can get by sometimes.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like a lot of the
Yeah.
time. But it
Nice
doesn't
variable ratio schedule going there.
Totally. Yep.
But ethically, these are skills we need to continue honing and continue practicing and continue making sure we disseminate too to the people we supervise.
Yeah, and I understand one of the most common ethical claims filed against BCBs has to do with a failure to individualize treatment. How do you demonstrate that you've individualized services unless you have some data to point to and say, here's what he needed, here's what I did?
Yeah,
It matters.
definitely.
And there's something exciting about making your new data sheet or thinking, oh, this is a new problem that I've never seen before, and I want to use the data to figure out where I want to focus.
I will put money down right here and now that being a behavior analyst is way more fun with data. That data are the place where we get to do our decision making. Like they occasion that problem solving repertoire along with concepts and principles. It's where you're figuring it out when you're immersed in data.
And you're validated.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
Like, let's be honest.
Big conditioned reinforcement
It is nice.
associated with seeing those changes on the graph.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I totally agree.
There's your flutter, Diana.
All right. Well, Amanda, thank you very much for coming on the show and sharing all of this information with us and getting us thinking about ethics in data and how we can continue to improve our practice and use of it. So,
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Yay.
Anytime.
Diana and Jackie, you were here as well. That was no, thank you guys. No, thank you both for being here yet again for the show. So everyone, thank you as well for listening to our episode. Remember, for those of you applying for CEs, this will count towards an ethics CE. So, just so you know, just letting you know, it's a fun fact. You can find us online at ABA Inside Track. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. We have the website's abainsidetrack.com. You can email us at abainsidetrack@gmail.com as well. And we've had actually a couple good emails recently to bring up some really nice discussion points. And so we usually like to share those on our preview episodes. So that's what we'll be doing next week. Before we go, though, Jackie, it's school time again. And I know you have an announcement.
It is school time again, and if anyone is listening that would love to get a career in behavior analysis, I urge you to check out the Masters of Applied Behavior Analysis at Regis College. We have a full-time, part-time, and certificate option. So come on down.
Excellent. And you can check out our merch store where Jackie is selling hats with her face and T-shirts that say ABA hater on them for some reason, and multiple Christmas albums that we have yet to record. But they'll be there soon.
And finally, the pocket compliance code.
And our pocket compliance code.
Hot seller.
Yeah.
So everyone, thank you so much for being here. Everyone, thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with a preview episode where we'll talk about what our next exciting topic will be. But until then, keep responding. Bye.
See you later.